Welcome Wargamers, Doug here from 2+ Stuff, and today I want to talk about a big development in the wargaming world, and that is the launch of Mark IV for Warmachine and Hordes, the newest edition of battles set in the Iron Kingdoms, as it were, as that's the name of their setting. And I wanted to kind of start the conversation a few different ways. There's a lot of opinions about Privateer Press and Warmachine and Hordes that are just generally fairly negative. A lot of it's warranted by the way the company's acted in the past, and a lot of it is just hurt feelings. You know, the game kind of went on a downward slide right as Games Workshop was kind of hitting its more modern golden age in terms of directly talking to its consumers and taking feedback and stuff like that. And so the game kind of went down into a lurch. But what I'd like to do is talk about this because there are a few things that are meaningful for the game industry. Even if you have no interest in Warmachine Hordes, there's a few things that I think are indicators of how the industry is going. We'll talk about those in a second. But what I wanted to do is start the discussion with a brief rundown of my biases, because you always have biases, no matter how positive or negative they may be, to try and let you know where I'm coming from. Because like I said, a lot of people take these things very, I'm going to say, to heart, very intensely, gamer emotions, and it's like, meh. So starting off with my story, if you're not familiar with me, Warmachine and Hordes was actually my initial war game. I had built models before when I was a kid. Some of them happened to be Warhammer models, but I didn't play the game. When I graduated college and I needed a hobby to fill my time before going insane, I was looking around and I picked up a whole bunch of bottle kits from Hobby Lobby that were like World War II focused, and I was looking for tutorials on how to paint models online, and I stumbled upon a PDF by Mini Wargaming of all things, and one of the tutorials they had was this little tiny robot with a steam stack coming out of his back, and I think the tutorial was on like object source lighting or something like that, and I was just smitten by that model. Well, it turns out it was a Warmachine and Hordes model, specifically whatever their dwarves are called, one of their little warjacks. So then I did some Googling, I learned about the game, saw the rule book, the quick start rules for free online. I found a local group in Iowa City, Iowa, and I got plugged right in. It's where I met my buddy Steve. Hey Steve, he still watches. And I had just a wonderful time. The community there was awesome. There's some really cool guys and girls, and I had an absolute blast. And it was a much more competitive game than Warhammer, or at least any kind of Warhammer that I've played. And I enjoyed it. You know, there's this idea that I'm just some narrative gamer, and I can't appreciate the finer things of tactical play. Nothing's further from the truth. I love punching people in the face, as long as that's what the game's about, right? For me, Warhammer is always about creating a story, whereas Warmachine was about the game. And I think that was the appeal to a lot of people. A lot of its success was gained during the time when, frankly, it seemed like Games Workshop didn't give a crap about the game balance or even the health and well-being of its own IP. So that makes sense to me. And of course, then as Games Workshop, the sleeping giant that it is, finally woke up that it's the dawn of the 21st century and got a website and crap like that, or allowed people to sell things online, rather. That's when you started to see Privateer Press's stocks start to fall, and now we're in a position where people largely consider it a dead game. Most stores I've been in sell their products for 40% off because they're just trying to dump inventory. They address a lot of the reasons why that happened, but now let's talk about what's changed. Essentially, what changed from that point in my story to now is that I moved to Seattle, which I thought would be a Warmachine and Hordes mecca, because that's where Privateer Press is located, right? And it was, but it turned out it kind of sucked, because everyone was so into the nuts and bolts of the game, like in terms of playing and dice statistics and that kind of stuff, that they moved away from the part of the hobby that literally drew me to the game in the first place, which is the modeling. I would see tons of models. There would be models that had no arms because the players didn't want to commit to one build or another. And it's like, just build the damn model. Just glue the model together. And then nothing was hardly ever painted. There were a few armies that were exceptional and beautiful to the point where the average person didn't want to try, which is like, kind of missed the point on that one. And so I was just very like, I just wasn't interested. I was looking at my Warmachine and Hordes group up in Seattle area and seeing all these super bland gray plastic and metal models with no arms. And then I looked over to the side here, and it got Warhammer players with like massive, fully painted, what we now know as Soul Blight Gravelords, armies, and orcs, and all these kinds of crazy things. And I was like, I want to go over there. and that was honestly where I checked out of Privateer Press games. Not because of any specific thing. I mean, I bounced around armies in that game just like I do here. I had Cignar, Menoth. I tried Hordes for a bit, but it just didn't click the way that the Animus rules work. Ignore that if you have no idea what I'm talking about. But yeah, no, I thoroughly enjoyed it. What I understand, though, is that right after I exited the game and got into Warhammer, which was on its own crash course into the end times. When I got into Warhammer, the end times had already begun. Privateer Press was having their own issue because Mark III, even though it seems most people say the game is in a really good way, it was launched in a horrific fashion. I remember talking to store owners up in the Seattle area, specifically Heroic Knights Games, which I think is out of business now. But the store owner was lamenting to me. He was selling me Warhammer miniatures, specifically the Lord of Blights that came out during the end times, at like 60% off because he couldn't sell it. He's like, I can't give these things away because the birth of Age of Cignar had tanked all of his player base's interest in Games Workshop games because they blew up the old world. At the same time, people were really interested in Warmachine and Hordes, but the way that the edition was launched, first of all, there was numerous problems with the resources and stuff like that. It would be the equivalent of when the new 40K dropped, like in 8th edition, when all the armies had compendiums rather than like an actual codex or anything like that. What if those compendiums were chock full of errors and 90% of the people trying to sell you the game could not get their hands on one? It was a supply and demand issue out the nose, and the whole thing kind of fell apart. Many people got angry and left the game. Combined with the fact that store owners cannot get the products that people need to literally play the game. Your basic unit rules were difficult to get. In addition, Privateer Press, by their own admission in an article we're going to talk about here, went into full SKU bloat. And when I say SKU, what I mean is the literal number of products that a store has to have on the shelf. So if you and I, if you don't know any, this is for people who don't know a single thing about store interactions, how storefronts work. So it's totally, if you do, just ignore me. But when you walk into a store, you expect there to be product for you to buy. Like you walk in and you're like, I play Warmachine. So you look at the wall and you see the Warmachine section. You go to where all the Cignar models are and you're like, I like this character, and you grab them up. The thing is, the game that they created expanded exceptionally wide in terms of the number of model kits that they were creating. Individual kits for each machine, each warjack rather, each hero, each support solo. There was units, and then there was unit attachments were a different thing. And like the amount of wall space that it took to cater to this game became outrageous, right? To fully support it and be a store that has everything that you would want was unreasonable. At the same time, not being able to get the basic things you need to play the game. So it's like, yes, this was written in the stars that it was going to crash and burn. At the same time, a few other things went down. They got rid of their Pressginger program, which was sort of like volunteers who could earn store credit, so to speak, and a few other things through teaching and that kind of stuff. Those programs I always have mixed feelings about. Personally, that's not a detriment to me. I never was a press ganger, never needed to be one, whatever. But I understand that some people were really upset. And I know that I just want to make this clear, I understand that there are micro dramas within all the things that I listed, but I don't know those individual stories. So if there's more frustration that I'm not presenting, please understand, I know it's out there. I'm just trying to synthesize this to new folks. So the game was kind of in this weird lurch where they had rules that were inaccessible, too many models, and the game was just kind of going off rails. That being said, once the dust settled, the people who were playing Edition 3 loved it. I mean, like, there was a lot of game balance concessions made, a lot of redesign to things. They were still releasing some killer models. Like, if you want to talk about my favorite model range in all of wargaming, the Pharaoh line of models, the pigmen from the minion side of Hordes, which is a shame because, like I said, I don't understand. The Animus mechanic never clicked for me. They are some of my favorite frickin' models that have ever existed, but they fell into obscurity because they're just, 30 of 10,000 SKUs. SKUs being the number, like the actual entry into a database for stores to use. So what do we do with this? Well, we have an article here that I'm going to share, and I want to go to the shared screen with me, and we're going to be talking about this. This is the Mark IV beta rules and change comparison. Now, they've done a series of articles talking about this, but this is our beta into the core rules of the game as well as their first draft of armies. So I don't remember how many armies existed towards the end, because I know they added one or two after I left. I don't have the exact number, but the core of Warmachine was about 4 armies, right? You had your Menoth, Kador, which are kind of your Russian, equivalent. with Menoth being your religious zealots. Cignar was your high technology shooting faction. And then there was Crix, which was sort of your undead macabre stuff. And so I was kind of curious to see how they were going to do this. Essentially what they've done is they released the entire rulebook, period. Like, it's a beta version, but it's the rulebook. It's a complete one too. And then below that, there's a bunch of beta cards, which are essentially just kind of giving you an insight into where their design directions are going. Okay, I like this approach. And we're going to compare a few things here. And then down below, as we're going to get into, we're going to spend most of our time here because I really want you to read these articles for yourself. I'm going to put the link to this, which has the beta rulebook and the beta cards, in the description of this video if you want to read it for yourself. And then we're going to focus a lot on the changes from Mark III to Mark IV and what that means as far as the game goes. What I want to say up top here, okay? Because there's a lot of folks, I put a poll up there on Twitter and also on my channel asking if people would be interested in me talking about Warmachine again. Again, it's an IP that I have fond memories of. I do like it. I like steampunk. I like their aesthetic of their art and the lightning wreathing off things. It looks rad. The issue that I have seen a lot online as I was asking people, would you like me to cover this? Forgive me, I just bumped my elbow into a light. Is no, it's a dead game. All the good people in the community have already left. And there's nothing that they could do to recover from their negative PR. Okay, so let's address those. I got into Age of Sigmar at the height of hatred towards Games Workshop and Age of Sigmar. I started this channel when nobody else wanted to talk about Age of Sigmar. In fact, the entire crux of this thing that I am doing now full time was simply to say, hey, I like this thing, no one else is talking about it. I'm gonna talk about it. The idea that we shouldn't talk about it because no one's talking about it is dumb and self-defeating. If no one's talking about it, then start talking about it. I don't know, it's just that kind of like loop in logic where it's like, well, we make the community that we want to be a part of. I wanted to make a community that was focused on narrative gaming, having ridiculous rules for ridiculous models that seem like a lot of fun and you'll walk away laughing after having had a couple beers with your friends. That is what 2+ Tough is about. That's what I'm about. And I did it. Age of Sigmar, it had a rough start, really rough start, damn rough start, but if you hung in there, there's a little bit of gold in that there pile of turd, and it became one of the most fun experiences and life-changing things for me and so many other people. Artists that have been taken back and got into the hobby because of these exceptional minis, and gamers who are switching from other game systems to AOS because it is the most well-supported and streamlined. Its rules are better than 40k, which is something that you couldn't always say about fantasy battles as their additions ebbed and flowed. People are coming from 40k to AOS in droves. It's just constantly when I'm looking at my feed, it's just what I see is people who are 40k players, AOS curious. Hey, I thought this game was dead, it was terrible. My point in all this is it's only dead if you let it die. That's it. The idea that Privateer Press has done something that they cannot ever undo, I would like to remind you that grown men set their armies on fire because Games Workshop quote-unquote retconned 20 years of lore. Oh no, they put 20 years of stories that were all fake to rest. Woe is me. I don't care about any of that. The fact is, if this is a company that has a design and a direction that is interesting, intriguing, and invigorating to the hobby, which, I'm going to say this, if they follow through on what they say, this is, as I'm going to describe in a minute, they deserve a chance. That's all. And I'm going to talk about them. Why? Because if nothing else, I'm a sucker for the underdog, and that's why I talked about Age of Sigmar, and that's why I'm going to talk about Warmachine and Hordes too. Now, going through our little article here, as you can see, we have they have it in a window, but I went ahead and just blew it up to its own page. We have the rules preview, and as you can see, they give you truly the entire rule book. Now, it is in beta. There are some parts of this that I think are lacking in information. For example, one of the new things to this edition is being able to customize your warjacks. That is, it used to be when you bought a warjack model from Privateer Press, one of two things would happen. One, it was a single pose model, meaning this kit builds this exact unit with these exact weapons, nothing else, no variation. Or it was a multi-kit, which is the one I talked about earlier when people didn't want to glue the frickin' arms on because they didn't want to commit to anything in life, and so wondered why they died alone lonely. I'm just joking. I'm having fun here. But multi-kits where there were 3 to 4 bespoke you know, this is an ironclad, this is this other thing, and you had to build them according to specific things. An ironclad has these arms, the other version has this arm. What they've done now is basically turned all, what I think they're going for is turning those multi-kits into a single kit that has multiple weapon options. So instead of building 3 different warjacks from one kit based on what their arms are, now it is just the ironclad with these weapons. And you get to choose what weapons he has and special rules and stuff like that. One thing I'm going to throw out there really right now is I looked at the preview, the beta cards, that kind of thing. It is an underdeveloped concept that as long as they fully develop it before, you know, true launch, this is still the beta sequence, it'll be really cool, but right now it's not enough. By that I mean, if you look at the marked whatever cards, I'm sorry, I was breezing through these earlier. So if we look at this one, this is the Striker Cignar Storm Legion Heavy Warjack. As you can see, it comes with a base thing, and then you have head options. So you, depending on the type of head that you choose, it grants various abilities and has a point cost associated with it. And then you have right arm, left arm. These are all like weapon mounts where you can put things. Not every Warjack has these. And I'm kind of torn on that, because initially I'm like, okay, that's super fair. These are beta rules. I don't want the text bloat of every single Warjack having a myriad of options. That being said, only Cignar has access to customization as per these beta rules. I feel like they missed an opportunity to show us what that would look like in various factions. So like, it would have been nice if one kit from each of the factions represented, I believe there's 4 in these beta cards here, had options. You know what I mean? So we can kind of get a sense, but you look at Menoth, who were fantastic at using Warjacks before. They don't have any customizable ones. If you look at Crix, and I think Orgoth is the other one. I don't recall that faction, but I might just be forgetting. It's been a long, long time. But my point is, it's a cool concept. They're using the space that they have in terms of the SKUs more efficiently. So the beta rules, as my point in going into this stuff about the Warjack specifically, is the beta rules are giving us a design direction. And what I am saying is, if they continue in that direction, this game is going to do really well. If they flounder and don't deliver on promises, they deserve the obscurity grave that they're crawling into. How about that? That's probably a mean way to say it, but let's dig into the actual meat of this article down below. So changes from Warmachine 3 to 4, and I'll go through what the differences are and how it's changed, and how you're going to hear some of these things when you ask folks about Warmachine and Hordes at various stores. Okay, so removal of facings. Warmachine Hordes did have front and back facings, where if you got hit from behind or you tried to leave combat, you would get free strikes against you. Forgive me, there's a train going by. They'll go away here in just a second. I'm not stopping because it's getting late and I'm tired. So removing a facings is a big deal, just because it just makes it so much simpler. You know, I think a lot of the change from 3 to 4 is going to be trimming down rules. And that is so nice. It was so nice. Removal of free strikes. It used to be that if you were walking away, like let's say you and I were in melee combat, if I go to walk away, you would get a free strike against me. And it makes perfect sense. The problem is it would stop gameplay. So like, I would go to move, and in my movement, we have to stop everything. You roll an attack. I have to figure out how bad it hurt me. If it's a Warjack, where it hurt me, meaning they have like different systems that can be affected by things, and resolve all that, and then I can continue. If you magnify that by how many units you want to have move, it gets ridiculous. So what they essentially did was remove free strikes. If you move out of combat, you forego your ability to fight that round, which makes perfect sense, right? All of your attention to do combat actions is focused on not taking a punch from the guy you're walking away from. Thumbs up for me. Simplification of unit rules. And this is an interesting one. They trimmed a lot of the fat when it comes specifically to units. And the way that they define units is, in Warhammer, everything's a unit. Sometimes units have one model, sometimes they have a billion. In Warmachine, a unit is a group of models. So there's solos, heroes, units would be like 5 guys with guns kind of a thing. They simplified a lot of this by reducing things like standard bearers and coherency and that kind of stuff. They've actually simplified it into a type of rule set that I really like from Star Wars Legion, which is when you go to activate the unit and you move them, pick a dude, move him, and then everybody else just kind of files in 2 inches around him. Don't worry about the minutia of micro movements. I cannot stand that stuff. I despise it in Warhammer so much. especially in 40k when there's like weapons with various ranges and that kind of stuff. You might have like a heavy gunner with one range attached to a unit that has a smaller, and you have to move all these movement shenanigans. I hate that stuff. So I like this quite a bit. The only thing that I see is interesting here is that the coherency, quote unquote, that they have, everybody has to be within 2 inches of the model that moved. That could get a little bit interesting because I don't feel like that's a lot of room. But then again, they did say that they reduced the size of units, so I'm sure that will help. It seems like the average unit's about 5 dudes, which if you have one in the middle and then a ring around them, yeah, 2 inches is probably fine, but I can think of some terrain scenarios where that gets a little bit weird, and we'll talk about terrain here in a second. But, you know, I think overall it's a good change. I would have much more liked it if it was 3 inches. I don't know. It's just something like that. I like having give them a little breathing room, but again, it's beta rules. That could definitely change. AOEs and spray attacks, basically they got rid of templates. Warmachine Hordes always use templates. I will be honest, I am a sucker for templates, specifically flamethrower ones, but I understand they weigh down the game, especially if you have a unit that can fire multiples of them, which there were. There were one of the giant colossal warjacks they had for Menoth had like multiple flamethrowers on it, and it just bogged things down, you know, all the time. Next is Warjack and Warbeast customization. We kind of chatted on this. We've introduced Warjack and Warbeast customization to the game. This has enabled us to produce a smaller number of Warjack chassis, but with head and weapon options that allow for a broad array of tailoring and specialization for your preferred army and tactics. Each option has a cost associated with it, giving players broad flexibility to these models in their armies. Now, like I said, we only really have Cignar Warjacks as the beta version of this. From what I see, I really do like. I'm going to throw that out there. I like this. The whole point of Warmachine is the war machines. That is the Warjacks, right? The big stompy monsters that get people into the game. Having as much customization as possible to those, I think, sounds like an absolute blast. Now, how you're going to handle that in terms of, you know, list building and where the balancing factor for all those things comes in, I don't have a dang clue, but I'm here for it. Like, it's what I wanted. One of the things that I have truly never forgotten loving from Warmachine Hordes is that the Warjacks have and Warbeasts, the monsters, the big stompy things, have all kinds of rules to do all the fun things that you've ever wanted to do. When I think of like Marvel Crisis Protocol, okay, another popular game right now, I love playing as like Doc Ock or Kingpin or the Lizard and throwing my enemies. It's just such a thematic thing, and like you could have stuff in the old Warmachine Hordes of, you know, disabling a weapon system because you had your Warjack grab onto their cannon or something like that. You could put them in a headlock, you could headbutt them, you could toss smaller enemies. Like, the rules existed. It was a thick rule book, but most of it you didn't need unless you wanted to do those crazy ridiculous things that were so stinking fun, in which case it was weirdly exciting to go to that page of the rule book. So I think, you know, all it says is Warjack and Warbeast customization. We see a small sliver of that, but I'm going to say if you zoom out and refocus and put the Warjacks as the point of the game, the cool thing that we're all here for, which it always should have been, that's a win. Cool. Next is racked spells. So before, warcasters, meaning your spellcasters in the army, would have a set list of spells. They only know blank. Okay, that's all there was to it. The spells that are assigned to these warcasters can be thought of as their signature spells. So they all still have their own spells, signature ones, but others can be added. So rack spells are selected from options available to every warcaster in the army, and every new army has 10 rack spell options available to it. Rack options further allow a player to tailor their warcaster, their tactics, and how they want to play. So essentially, you pick a leader, they have some spells built in, then you and I get to choose what other cool things we would want to add to it to kind of magnify their power based on what our list is trying to achieve. I like that. It's a degree of customization without fully yielding the character nature of things. Like, they want named characters to lead their armies, which is not my favorite thing, I'll be honest, but I feel like this is a good middleman. Basically, they could have, you know, pre-baked spells ready to deploy, and this is how they're saying that. Racked spells is how they're articulating that. In addition, they have something new called command cards. Command cards are a new mechanic that has been added to Mark IV. As part of army creation, each player selects a hand of 5 command cards. These cards are open information, first of all, because it's part of your army construction. These cards are one use only, and each player can play up to 2 per per turn. Each command card details when it can be played, blah, 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 and so on. Basically, they are meant to be these little resources that you can drop to break up gotcha moments. Okay, so they have some good examples here. Command cards have relatively minor effects that are intended to help mitigate bad matchup and gotcha moments. For example, they include cards that grant a model or unit Pathfinder, meaning you can traverse terrain without penalty for an activation, or give a model's weapon damage type magical, meaning it can hurt ethereal ghost things. So it's just like, oh, I'm playing against, an army that uses ethereal stuff. I'm gonna bank this card for one really important swing, and then I know I'll have at least some option to do damage, kind of a deal. I like that. It's a cool way of mitigating some of the gotcha is the best word for it. Because with old Warmachine hordes, because they kept developing outward, meaning just add new units, add new attachments, all this kind of thing, the corpus of knowledge that you needed to build a worthwhile list was unreasonable. That's my word I'm going to use. Unreasonable. You had to know the game so well to have any chance of even doing moderately well. Like my favorite thing to do is to go 2-1 at an event, but to do that with Warmachine and Hordes, you had to know what was coming at you and how to respond to it and what synergies your opponents is going to be. Like, it was just, for the amount to do moderately well required way more work than doing moderately well, I feel like, in most other games, is what I'm saying. Command cards are probably a great way to mitigate some of that gotchiness, where now you have some tools available to you. You can either lean your command cards into redoubling what you already want to do or covering up weaknesses, and it kind of works as a secondary sideboard. Speaking of sideboards, I do want to back up here. The racked spells, this is an interesting thing that I somehow missed the sentence. These spells are chosen before the start of a game, but after seeing what you are facing. This gives the new casters amazing flexibility at minimizing the impacts of poor planning or bad matchups. It's essentially your spell list, which is a huge deal because your warcaster is the most meaningful part of your army, essentially as a sideboard. I like that. That's a neat thing. I mean, again, both of those things in tandem. Command cards giving minor benefits that allow you to override, circumvent, or use minor rules, plus a spell list that is reactionary to what is across the table. Sure, you'll probably start the game learning a few basic ones and just kind of keep those in your pocket, but as your, again, corpus of knowledge increases with the game, then you can start exploring other things and mitigate weaknesses and stuff, and I like that. They also went ahead and divided the game into new modes of play. The original Warmachine Hordes, at least up until 3rd edition, there was scenario play, so you had to, just like in every other war game, right? You're fighting over scenario points and you're trying to catch things or, control a specific point in the battlefield. But there was always a secondary win condition of assassination. If you killed your opponent's warcaster, then you immediately won the game. And so what they've actually done is backed that up a bit. Now we have, standard Warmachine would be assassination mode, where that's on the table. Execution mode is kind of what it seems to be the new standard, which is only warcasters can kill other warcasters, which is a big deal. So that immediately, so you're not just going to have a sniper unit take out the enemy leader and you're done, which is real nice. So only warcasters can kill them. Other units can hurt enemy warcasters. So like if I have a big stompy robot and I send him up, he can pummel the opponent, bring him down to 0 wounds, and then he's in a state, what do they call it? Vulnerable. If you're vulnerable, all of your upkeep spells, so like long lasting ones that go on for multiple turns, they all expire and you basically reset to 1 health box. So that's an interesting thing. Now, of course, you can do a 1-2 punch where one unit comes up, pummels you into 0, and then your warcaster comes up and pummels the enemy that last wound and wins the game. That's still possible, but what it means is it requires so much more than just a crazy assassination run. They've also gone ahead and removed things like theme forces. Essentially, they've redefined the way armies work. This is going to be my kind of high level for Age of Cignar players who might be curious. Instead of having 6 or 7 armies for Warmachine and 6 or 7 for Hordes, complete with theme armies within them, so like theme forces. If you take these specific troops within the Cignar army, you get such and such benefits. That's what they were doing for a long time. I would say kind of like how 40k was doing that for a while. If you take Space Marines and this detachment, you get these bonus things. Instead, what they've gone and done is broken those armies up into forces, all of which are a part of grand armies. So for example, let's see, what is it? Looking for an example here, apologies. So for example, starting off, there's going to be the Cignar Storm Legion. If you think of this in like Warhammer terms, imagine Cignar is the Grand Alliance. It's the big mega pool from which you can pull all your models and resources, but you're only going to focus on this little section, meaning in Warhammer equivalent, Cities of Sigmar. Right, Grand Alliance Order, Cities of Cignar, and then within there are sub-factions. In the same way, Cignar is sort of the grand allegiance of all the units you can pull from, and then within there are specific factions that you can use. In this case, the Storm Legion. And so it'll have its own bespoke bunch of models from that huge, massive pile of SKUs that Privateer Press created. And that's kind of the way I think about it. So you're going to have multiple Cignar armies, but all with a different theme. These are the Storm Boys that use a lot of lightning wreathed equipment and things that are conductors for electricity. You're going to have lightning spells going off and all these cool things, whereas they're not going to have some of the other, other bells and whistles that Cignar has, like snipers and things like that. There was going to be a separate army for those kinds of units. So it's an interesting way to break things up. To me, I read that as we had to restructure because our SKUs were getting ridiculous, and also trying to balance all these theme forces was miserable. That's how I read that one. Another thing they changed, and this is a minor one I always thought was stupid, models can only attack enemy models. It used to be you could attack your own things. There were reasons to do that. A big one was to gain extra movement. You could charge your own model essentially. And get some other stuff there. I never really cared for that. I don't really care. They went ahead and merged Warmachine and Hordes into one, and they're just calling it Warmachine now, which is nice. I understand aesthetically the reason for having two systems, because the way Warcasters and Warbeasts operate is fundamentally different from Warcasters and Warmachines, and Warjacks rather, but the two were never so different that I felt like they deserved to be different games. They just weren't. So bringing it all back into Warmachine, I think is going to be cool. Hopefully I kind of click with the Hordes side of things, because I really would like to have that Pharaoh army, but we'll see. They balance-wise put a lot more emphasis on Warjacks and Warbeasts, which I was talking about before. I think that is the key to some of these things. They streamline the stats, meaning I'm not going to go into detail on this, but it used to be they had more stats on the entry cards, and they basically trimmed it all down, and we're like, this is getting ridiculous. You're trying to keep track of too many things, and remove some of the stats, or just made some of them dual purpose, that kind of thing. As far as other big changes, they standardized running distances, where it used to be speed and movement being different things. Now, if you're running, you advance 5. You just +5 whatever your movement is. Done. Flat. Everyone gets that. Cool. Melee ranges were increased from 0.5 inches to 1 inch, and if you don't think that's a huge change, you don't understand. You weren't playing it back in the day, because there's nothing more infuriating than a 20-foot tall killing machine standing 0.75 inches away from a tiny guy who is like the person's height is 1/5 the size of the hammer that the deity of machines is carrying, but because he's outside a half an inch, you can't hit him. And you're like, this is bull. So big change there. I like that quite a bit. Models are allowed to make ranged attacks while engaged. For all the things that people gave crap about Age of Sigmar for when that happened, I like that they're doing it. Now, of course, there is a negative modifier to this. That's its own deal. I like that quite a bit. More crits is always good. I'm just going to go ahead and simplify these. They're bringing elevation back. I guess in the time that I was gone, because I always played with three-dimensional terrain, like heights and hills and that kind of stuff. But I guess at a certain point, Privateer Press got involved with Big Felt and went away with all the different terrain, and now it's just flat circles or whatever. That is the lamest thing and the dumbest idea for a miniatures game to ever do. I had only heard about that recently, but okay. So three-dimensional terrain, it's just one of those things, if you're not going to play with three-dimensional terrain, why are you playing a miniatures game? That's just kind of my thought. Whatever. Simplified power attacks. Power attacks are the kind of things that I was talking about earlier, where you're throwing things, you're holding down weapons, that kind of deal. And then just simplification of model rules and keywords and stuff like that. But one thing I do want to touch on, and this is not in this specific article because it's just part of a different one. I'm just wanting to focus on this one, comparing the rules. They're also going to have a huge focus on STLs, meaning you will be able to buy actual Warmachine licensed STL files for your home printing. It seems like the company is really embracing the digital age. And when I mentioned earlier that if Privateer Press can deliver on what they're promising, it's a huge step for the industry. And this is what I'm talking about, where they seem to be embracing the digital age and the age of 3D printing in a way that I haven't quite seen before, and on a scale that I haven't seen before. I mean, just the scale being the number of people who are still interested in Warmachine, which is awesome. But when it comes to what they're doing, essentially, they're going to release STLs of warjacks that have holes for all the magnets so you can magnetize all the weapons to your heart's content. That's awesome. Obviously, you can print miniatures and that kind of stuff. I'm assuming they're going to have more restrictions around base sizes, since base sizes are basically how you determine line of sight. The actual model doesn't matter so much, as like they all take up a cylinder of space. But with an emphasis on 3D printing, there's a whole crowd of people who love these models that can now go into them and be like, this costs me nothing, I'm willing to try your rule set. And again, I think that does feed into the emphasis on warjacks. Now, I haven't tried building a list. I pulled up a YouTube video. This is by the channel, where is it at? Ztrox Wargaming. 283 subscribers. Go give them a like. I will. Why not? Let's do it. But basically, they took the beta cards and began testing this thing immediately. And I mean, they basically just fast forward through the various turns. This is the smallest point size of the game, 50 points, where there's just, I think, 3 or 4 units and some warjacks on the table. Nothing's painted, but they're doing beta rules, right? They're trying the things that were released just now, and these are not typical army lists that existed before. So I don't begrudge them for that at all whatsoever. It was a really interesting watch, because what you're essentially getting to see is these people go through the warjack options, the new spell lists, racked spells, and scenario and objective play. And if you look at the way this game is going, their warcasters and their leaders are much more like involved in the fracas, so to speak. And that's because they're not worried about assassination all the time. It used to be you have these great big battle heroes who are, you know, awarded all kinds of accolades, and you read their lore and it's like, he's the butcher of Kardov, and he gets in there and murderates people up close. And then he's standing in the back freaking line of the table because he doesn't want to get his head shot off. And it's like, well, that doesn't add up. I feel like these players, as I've been watching, have a much more freedom to be able to actually get their warcasters in to do things. Now, of course, there's a lot of paper flipping. They're going through the various rules, but I did appreciate this video because just looking at the board, what I'm seeing is smaller, tighter units, so you can kind of see what's going on. Obviously, it's messy now, but that's because I started this halfway through the video. But from the beginning, I was able to figure out where everybody was. An emphasis on warjacks and zone control. It looks like a lot of fun. In a totally separate article, I'll throw it up here, they also are going to have like starter reviews. Essentially, for $200, you buy a box and it has all of the options available to that particular, army set. So for example, this one, as I said before, is the Orgoth Sea Raiders. $200 gets you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh no, wait, no, I passed those because those are 5 model units. Okay, so it's 1 unit of 5 model. Ooh, interesting. Okay, so you get, I count 22 models, all things considered. And then it comes with the magnets to magnetize the weapon options for your warjacks. Like, I like that. Honestly, I like that. Look at the size of this army. Are you kidding me? That's amazing. Now, I believe the standard size of games is 75 points. This would be 50 if I'm not mistaken. Unless it was written somewhere and I didn't see it. But yeah, so that's roughly what we're looking at here is a basic army for $200, which is a fantastic price point for this hobby industry. The fact that you have so many weapon options, these things are not going to go out of style anytime soon. And I'm assuming a lot of these will be STL available. Yeah, this will allow you to play a 50-point game of Warmachine. So that's fantastic. And then you go down to the next one, and we've got Cignar Storm Legion. This is, if I do get back into this game, what I will start with because, okay, personal history game gush time. The reason I struggled with Warmachine Hordes in the beginning was because I was picking up models that I thought looked cool but weren't necessarily working well together. And I don't even mean like they should work together but they don't kind of a thing, like an internal broken logic, like the idea of a vampire not working well with zombies or something like that. I was picking out just random stuff. I was just like walking up to the shelf and I'd be like, can I technically use that in my army? And the guy was like, I guess. I'd be like, sold. I was a dingus, but the models that I liked the most were all lightning themed, and there wasn't really a cohesive lightning theme at that point in time in like edition 2 of Warmachine and Hordes, so I never really got a chance to see it at its full best. But you know, you're looking at this now, it's roughly the same size, right? 2 units of 5 dudes, 2 units of 3 dudes, a couple of random guys there. You're looking at about the same thing, and again, it is a lightning themed army. A cool note about these guys, yeah, oh my god, these guys are new. I haven't seen these. There's like 3-man Terminator squads. One of the cool things about the Lightning Boys in the edition that I played, and I hope it translates over, I'm going to double check the rules as soon as I'm done with this video, is all the units were like, these are like your lightning basic guys with halberds and stuff. They were immune to lightning, but you had attacks that would continue arcing, like chain lightning. So what you would do is you'd ice your own guys, right? And then it would arc into somebody else. Now I said I don't like targeting my own guys for attacks. That still stands, but what even cool is that you could target an enemy. These guys, they're not the target of the attack. They're a part of the chain lightning sequence afterwards. So it could bounce from an enemy that was your target to these guys to somebody else, and all of that would work. And I was like, oh, this is so rad. I love that stuff, you know, just because they had the immunity keyword or whatever. So there's some cool things there. Of course, there's probably going to be more sets. Like I said, I think they're starting with 4 armies total. There should be a Medoth one and then a Crix one, which I'm very excited to see. And I don't know. At the end of the day, let me just give my honest thoughts. It's worth a shot. You know, if you already have the models, you have nothing to lose. If you have a 3D printer, make some cool models. Just do it. Make some cool models. That's the whole reason you bought the damn thing for. As far as anybody else, you know, I know there's a lot of hurt feelings. I know there's a lot of animosity towards Privateer Press with a lot of the things they did before. I'm just going to say, if we didn't live in a world with game designers being able to try new things and change the course of their company, make mistakes, apologize, and move forward, I wouldn't have a channel, because Age of Cignar wouldn't exist. It would have crashed and burned like everyone said it was going to, and was wrong 5 years ago. You know, again, I'm sure it's just me rooting for the underdog, but I am here for it. And I'm going to try it. We do still have some local players of Warmachine and Hordes. I would love to go out there and give it a whirl with them, specifically with the, what are they called? The Storm Legion. And I'm just going to report on what I find. You know, if I like the game, I'll talk about it. If I don't, I'll do a review video when I kind of express my concerns and problems, and then I'll probably just never talk about it again. Either way, you're going to hear more about it. Now, the last thing I want to touch on here for this video before I hop off is I'm going to put a link to, it's called Warmachine Big News is the name on the link. And it is essentially their Q&A about all of this. Before they launched the page with the beta rules and stuff, they put this out, which was essentially them giving us their thesis statement. And this is what I'm talking about when I said, if they stay the course and deliver on their message, they're going to do great. Where we have, why are we making a new edition? How to blow up the old world without hurting anyone, which is a funny little dig at GW, but whatever. They explain the differences in factions and armies and cadres and all that kind of stuff. We talked about that. They're basically taking a note from Games Workshop and reorganizing how their model lines go, injecting hordes into Warmachine, details about how you will be able to get the rules for stuff. Basically, they've always had an app called War Room that has all their card rules, and they're basically just leaning into that further, which is another example of them going further and further into the future and digital age, which is, I think, a good sign. I know not everybody's into it, but it just is what it is. Print media cannot keep up with the amount of releases that, quite frankly, customers want. So it is what it is. Our production is changing with the time. Metal is no longer a viable material. That's nice. Overseas production is rising in cost, and so they're going to have limited SKUs in store, but they're going to embrace, like I said, 3D printing technologies. And then they talked about this, where you can see on the actual diagram, all of their future models are coming out with these ports and stuff like that for magnets, which is so nice, because they didn't before, knowing fully well that their entire audience was magnetizing the ever-loving hell out of things. The SKU, meaning the rollout strategy, is certainly more aimed towards retailers. I think it's meant really to put their minds at ease. Here is the list of all, basically every faction's going to get, or the starter factions are going to get, an army starter and then an expansion box, and that's kind of their model. starter army expansion, starter army expansion. From there, the world's your oyster, ordering from their store, direct ordering model kits to your store, that kind of stuff. So there's some notes about organized play, which I didn't keep up with the latest organized play or whatever. And at the bottom, here's a roadmap. And I want to end this video just by saying one more time, if they can keep their word, if this roadmap is stuck to, and they do introduce and revitalize the hobby through introducing, digital rule formats in an easy and convenient way, if they do introduce, all these cool STL files so people can start building really awesome looking models on their own, if they do all those things, I believe we are going to have a radically different conversation by Gen Con of 2023. That's my thought. I'm open for it. If you would like to see Warmachine and Hordes talked about here on the channel, please, I'm begging of you, let me know, because I am just a man talking in a room by himself. So if you want to see something, I need input to let me know. Let me know in the comments down below. As you can see, they are going to do legacy armies, basically meaning they're updating all the stuff that already exists that's not going to be used going forward, kind of like how we have legends for Warhammer. Those kinds of things are still going to get updated by the end of the year, but I'm not really worried about that right now. The only sad bummer is, and I will say this, Hordes is not being worked on for the foreseeable future. I think they really wanted to nail down their plan of attack with Warmachine, like those specific rules, customizing things, how the focus works, all that kind of jazz, before they brought in the second element, which tweaks that a bit, which I'm fine with. I know a lot of people would be bummed. If I was playing my Pharaohs, I would be devastated. I understand. Patience is a virtue, and all you can do is just wait to see. Again, deliver on the promise. So, friends, this is going to be my thoughts. I would love to hear yours. Please leave in the comments down below. Also understand that because I'm willing to give something a try doesn't mean I'm a shill. It doesn't mean I'm a fanboy. I'm just willing to have a nice discourse about something, and I'd love to have your opinion on it as well. So let me know in the comments down below. I will catch you all there. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I'll check you out next time. Happy wargaming.